Yes, I grew up very much in a culture like that um, where people farmed and people hunted and people lived off the land a little bit still. And especially when it comes to, well, let's just get into it because I don't have too much housekeeping. We're talking about, as you saw by the thumbnail, maybe cannibal hillbillies, right? And my family, my grandma especially, is an Appalachian. She's one of the Appalachian people. Her family moved. They were Irish immigrants. They uh, they they moved into the New World, and they uh, did the land. When they had the land grab, they did land grabs in the mountains and carved out a little niche, not too far from Seaverville. I think it was. We went to visit my grandma's aunt who still lived out there when I was a kid, when I was 7 years old. I can't remember what the name was, but they were she her aunt was an identical twin with her own grandmother, my grandmother's grandmother. So she was super old at this time. She was like I want to say she's like 103 when we went to visit her. Identical twins to my grandmother's grandmother, grandmother's mother. Yeah, identical twins to my grandmother's mother. I'm sorry, but yeah, uh, and they lived in a hillbilly house up in the Appalachian Mountains, way back in the woods. It was kind of cool. So, but that's just to say that I don't come at this culture, at this Appalachia culture with like unrelated eyes. I'm not blind to the culture and to the stories and to the folklore that surrounds these people because it goes back hundreds of years. Um, the Appalachia was the first frontier when people settled. You had your 13 colonies all along the coast there, and the western edge of those colonies was up against or in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. And there were native people that lived back in there, um, and they did vie with the settlers. They did. There were wars and stuff between them. There were battles, especially early on, when you had different. Before the United States got its independence and such, there were vying, you know, empires that were making pacts with these native nations and whatnot that were in the west, beyond the mountains, or in the mountains and beyond in the lake areas. So it was a long, from the 1600s on up into the probably the mid 1800s. It was an ongoing conflict in this region to try to. I mean, that's what the Trail of Tears was the ultimate result of this, right? The ultimate culmination of all these events. Suddenly, every native, all the native people that are living in this region east of the Mississippi are just relocated, just jumbled up and herded across into the west, to be forgotten, to get out of the way for the white people, because those mountains were now theirs. So then you have these. Then it's the mid 1800s, right? And at the same time, you have this influx of Irish immigrants, a lot of poor people, um, moving into the areas. Enter my ancestors, and these mountains were just cleared out of the indigenous peoples that lived there, and so the immigrants, they got their land grants. They were done with being ruled. That's why they came here. That's a free land, or not free land, but well, it was free land. It was, yeah, for Western expansion. It was free land. Yeah, let's not even get into Andrew Jackson, because that guy does not need to be on our money. That'd be like, yeah, it's like putting Mussolini on money. Yeah, it and they it was brutal. what they did to the native people, and remove that. But suddenly all this land was free of inhabitants, and it wasn't the, again, I don't think I got to stress, it wasn't these new immigrants that 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 pushed the natives out. It wasn't their doing. They just came in their echo, looking for a place to live, in all this area the between the Eastern Appalachians and the Mississippi River was open and ready to be claimed. And except for the upper part, I think some of the areas around the Great Lakes were still French territory for a while there. But we'll get into that when we, at some point, I'm sure, when we start talking about and I do have a plan to. I think I'm going to do it in November, though. I'm going to talk about the beast that lived in the western reaches before. Basically, what lived in Louisiana Purchase, what the mountain men reported back to the gullible reporters. We'll talk about that. It's going to be fun. Fearsome creatures is what they're called. But right now we're talking about the Appalachian Mountains. Okay, so they get these rural country people that were wanting to get away from being governed. They wanted to have their own little land and kind of rule themselves and self-sustain their little communities, or the loose-knit communities even, live off the land, have their own little plot. And they did that in the Appalachian Mountains, and a culture developed, Appalachia culture, with there's a lot of folklore and things roped into it. And for a long time it was cool, and they were isolated, and they lived in their own little world, and lived their own ways. They did, they traded with other people, but they were a completely separate culture from the mainstream, especially after the Civil War, because Appalachia, unlike the dividing lines would have you think, Appalachia was mostly poor, so you didn't have a lot of, and the big plantation farms were not real viable in that landscape. It was mostly little private family farms and such, and it ran from it didn't run across the south or the north. It ran up the mountain range from north to south. So you have this whole culture, interlaced communities running north to south, or running south to north or north to south, however you want to look at it, right there in the midst of the Civil War. So talk about brother against brother, because they weren't, this wasn't their war. They were, again, a completely separate culture that came just to settle this region for the free land. We're not really wanted to be isolated. We're not really interested in too much involvement with the politics of these two vying Western powers, the superpower down south, because unlike people want to, there's a reason why we call it antebellum, because before the Civil War, the South was booming, it was thriving. After Louisiana Purchase was the best thing the United States government ever did, because Godspeed was saying, with the slave trade down there, and the Industrial Revolution kicking off in the cotton industry and the tobacco industry, the South was just booming and thriving. There were riverboats everywhere. That's why you see all these old images of people with the big flowing dresses and the big fancy ostentatious plantation houses, because they were really, really booming and really having a great go of life. I'm going to say they, I mean the European descendants that were in the area now. Obviously, the slaves were not having such a good go of things, but as far as the United States and the revenue that was coming in, definitely the South was just a pinnacle. And speaking of east of or west of the Mississippi, I mean, that was, St. Louis was like a beacon out there. So I mean, but you had to cross this Appalachia area. So they did get, these people in this area, they did get, influenced by the outside world. And there was a lot of Southern culture that they incorporated, even all the way up into like up near the Catskills and stuff. There was a lot of Southern culture that made its way up. And it's just because the rural nature of the area lended itself more to the Southern folklore than it did like maybe the more urbanized folklore. But folklore, it did have. Folklore was the prominent output of the Appalachia people. And I got to grow up with it because my grandma was from one of these people. And we'd hear the stories about the Wildmen in the woods. It's a real thing that people talked about at that time because, yeah, they drove out the Native Americans, Trail of Tears, but allegedly there were wild men. Now, I want to make it distinct because the Appalachian people every time I say Appalachia, I'm going to put an apple at you in the chat. Well, we can't even just the people of the regions can't even decide how they want to have it pronounced. It depends. There's like six. The Appalachia's divided into, or some people say Appalachie. I think my ancestor said Appalachie, but I don't like that. I don't think it. I don't. It doesn't roll off my tongue as good as Appalachia, and it's because I'm so used to talking about the continent Appalachia from the Mesozoic era. There was what was it, Appalachia and Laurasia, were the two continents divided North America by the Western Interior Seaway. So it's because I'm a science nerd. But yeah, Appalachia. Where was I? I got totally off my spiel here. Okay, so we have these alleged wild men that live in this mountainous region, right? And they are not they're from, so my family was from around Severville. So I don't know how, I think they say Appalachie there. My Aunt Mary Jane always said Appalachie, but she also lived and was raised in in South Carolina. So that might be a difference there too. Language is a funny thing. Every state says it differently, right? Okay, so there's a difference between this isolated culture, okay, and these wild men. The isolated culture are the ones that reported on the wild men, and the stories and folklore that came back would sort of indicate that that the wild men did kidnap women and children for breeding stock potentially. I'm not sure. They eat them. They were cannibals allegedly, but this really came to the forefront. For a while, this culture was isolated. My great grandma went to school in the 1920s, and it was still very much isolated, very much rural. They didn't have a lot of the conveniences you would have seen on the coast, like electricity at the time, plumbing, that sort of stuff. They still lived very much like it was still in the 1800s. They were not all the way up into the 50s. They were kind of behind because just the grid didn't come out there. It was difficult to cut your way through this dense miles and miles of mountains and forest, because unlike say the Rocky Mountains, where the mountains rise above the tree line and then there's passes in between them, Appalachia is it had its heyday hundreds of millions of years ago, and it is now eroded down to just green mountains is what we would call them, and they no longer rise above the tree line. At least not. There's one mountain I think that rises above still is above the tree line up in Maine, but the rest of the mountains don't rise above the tree line, so they are thickly forested from top to bottom, including the little valleys that would run between. So when it comes to getting electricity, getting out there, getting plumbing out there, it was not my roboting. Look at that roboting. Let me turn my camera off for a second. Okay, that should be better. Is Mount Mitchell above the tree line? I don't think it is, but anyway, so it's hard to get things out there. It's been hard to get things out there. It still is. There's still areas where they don't have a lot of the modern conveniences like fiber internet and things like that. Hell, there's areas around here in Missouri, of course. Missouri's got the Ozarks, which are kind of like little Appalachia, but um, anyway, so they were living in isolation out there and undisturbed by our culture for the most part, just doing what they can to get by. And then the National Park Service created the Smoky Mountain National Park, and a lot of these people had their lands just, nope, you can't live here anymore. You're gonna have to go. Which it happens. I mean, that's when they put in a dam. They need to make a lake. They have to what they call eminent domain to remove people, but they weren't engineering. Yeah, they weren't geoengineering the region. They were just cutting it off to leave it natural. So some of those people didn't even leave. They just stayed back in the woods. Allegedly, there's no proof of that, but obviously they aren't going to report themselves on the census illegally squatting in a national park, even though it was their land that they bought fairly, or their ancestors bought fairly, and they had worked that land for generations. There's an argument to be made there. Anyway, but they, people who wouldn't be bought out and all that. So you mix that with the early Wildman sightings of these. They were essentially like a Sasquatch-like sighting. So you get that kind of mixed in together. Anyway, but to the point that I'm getting at, this culture really hit this section of Appalachian, this backwoods culture, really hit the main scene when here recently when David Paulides, the missing 411 guy, talks about people who go missing in national parks. Let me see. Do I got something pulled up on David Paulides? I was going to give a quick, just a little rundown of who he is. Let's see. It's going to be in the Dennis Martin case. Just a second here. I had all this stuff pulled up, but you know me, I'm all over the place. So anyway, there was this famous case from the 1960s, Dennis Martin. Now, Dennis Martin was a 6-year-old boy whose dad took him and his brother, I believe it was, took him to the Smoky Mountain National Park for Father's Day. All right, let me share. All right, so this is where they went. Let me know, make sure you can see this and everything looks good. Let me put myself back up on the screen because I like it like this. Okay. So this is the Great Smoky Mountains. It's a lovely little national park. I went there just a couple of years ago and did some great hiking. It's beautiful country. I went in early October. This is the whole park here. Yep, the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. You got South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee here. Obviously, South Carolina is far away from the park, so we're not going to talk too much about that. But that's where half my family moved this way and half of them moved that way. But originally, they were from right around. I wish I could scroll zoom. Let me see. My family is from. Yeah, right around up in here. Southwest of Seaverville. They had land back up in here. Anyway, this is all the national park, and they were hiking in an area called Spence Field, which is where we're going to be right now. And the curious thing about Spence Field, and part of the problem, with the whole deal is that Spence Field is literally right on the border. Like right on the border. Look at that. You don't get much more on the border than that. And that does lead to some problems and some speculation about the Dennis Martin case. So, Dennis Martin was a 6-year-old boy on a nice day trip with, or I think they camped, so it was more than a day trip. I shouldn't say day trip. On a nice little trip with his dad, and camping and having just a nice time enjoying the park, which is what I did. I did with my wife at the time, and we had a great time. Saw bears and all kinds of cool stuff. That's going to come into play too here in a minute. So, when they got up to the field, they met another family. A lot of hullabaloo was made about this other family having the same last name, but the last name is Martin. I know dozens of people with the last name Martin, so to me, it's not like, ooh, that's. But some people make a big deal about that, which is weird. Anyway, so they said, hey, let's have our kids play together up here in the field while we just hang out and chit chat and enjoy nature. And the kids started playing hide and seek, and Dennis went and about 55 feet away from his dad, he went and ducked behind a bush to hide and never came back out. Now there are predators, obviously bears and such in the park, hogs and bobcats, alleged eastern cougars. At the time, I would have. We're talking 1969, so at the time there may have been some cougars in the area. That's definitely not out of the question. But Dennis was never seen again. He ducked behind a bush and was never seen again. A huge search was done. A huge search. All the area. They called in National Guard and Special Forces, the Boy Scouts. Everybody was in on this, looking for it, looking for this poor boy who just disappeared into the mountains. The Keys. Okay, so there was this family. I think it was 5 or 6 miles away. Because they were looking, they asked the rangers, can you tell us where to go to see bears? So they told them to go up to this ridge where you could see some black bear. Funny story about that. I spent the whole day in the Smokies looking for black bears and didn't see a dang thing. Went to downtown Gatlinburg and there were bears just all over this dumpster. It was wild, like raccoons are up here. So it's like you spend all day in the wild looking for them. All you need to do is find a dumpster if you want to see bears. Anyway, so they went out and were looking for it, looking for bears. I hadn't seen anything all day. And then one of the kids says, hey, look, there's a bear. Well, first they had heard a blood-curdling scream. I guess I should lead with that. And then it said, oh, look, there's a bear, and looked up on the ridge. But then the father, Mr. Keys, went up and looked up there, and what he saw was not a bear. He looked like a man wrapped in furs carrying something. So yeah, they reported that, and I guess allegedly the FBI ignored it. Anyway, so the Mr. Martin was kind of upset about them ignoring ignoring this report. So they the father's name was William. Anyway, so the Keys report kind of got pushed back, and then David Paulides shows up on the scene. Now he's the guy who has this, I want to call it a conspiracy theory, and I got roped into it too. If you want to say, people who get roped in conspiracy theories are dumb, well, that's me. I got roped into David Paulides' missing 411 conspiracy. And it took me years to dig myself out of it, because he is basically, I have a hard time saying. I don't want to say he's a grifter, but he has taken advantage of these missing person cases to kind of build his own clout. So when it comes to David Paulides, take everything he says with a grain of salt. Any and each instance that he talks about, investigate it yourself, because he makes a lot of inferences. He's not working for anybody but himself anymore, so he can present facts and fictions however he feels fit. He's not beholden to anybody to present the cases accurately or in a manner that we can better understand the options of the evidence. There's a lot of inferences that are presented as facts in the missing 411 cases, and a lot of counting the hits and ignoring the misses. It's missing 411. The whole concept is it's absolutely, bottom line, it is the Texas sharpshooter fallacy on a missing person scale, on a world global missing person scales. It's just Texas sharpshooter. It's drawing circles around where people go missing. People go missing in national parks. National parks are rural, and people that come and visit them are not necessarily acclimated to a rural environment, and bad things happen. That's just the nature of it. So yeah, there's going to be more missing persons in national parks. I'm not going to dismiss the whole phenomena. We can go further into this further down the road, but I've rambled enough that I want to get into this a bit more. So most people nowadays are of the opinion that the Dennis Martin disappearance was one of a few different options. There was a suspicious vehicle that was seen, a white vehicle, and that somebody loaded a person into. I don't know how viable that option is. When they go into that, obviously bears are a real threat. Wild pigs are too, but with a bear or with a bear, it's more likely to do the silent ambush killing than what a pig would. A pig would probably have made quite a stir of attacking a little boy, whereas a bear, I think, could stealthily grab a child without it and kill it before the child could cry out and carry it off into the woods. A bear could do that. A cougar could do that. A cougar, that's a cougar's MO. So an eastern cougar would have been able to pull that off for sure. All right, so let's see here. Oh, I had a map of Appalachia too. So we are looking in the yellow area. Here is where the national parks in the yellow and orange, but it's divided into counties. All right, so I've been exploring this for years and kind of, again, breaking my brain out of the missing 411 mindset to think that, oh, there's got to be links to all these drawn correlations and stuff. And there's a lot of inference about the Wildmen, and we'll get into the Wildmen here as I move forward. But the exploration of these topics has brought me to, I kept, on Reddit threads and missing 411 forums, I kept getting pointed back towards this YouTube channel called South Force 10. This is South Force 10, and this is what we're going to be watching. Okay, South Force 10 is basically a storytelling channel of Appalachian culture. It's got stories of ghost stories, stories about witches, haunted houses, evil places. But he's got a lot of content about the Dennis Martin case, and I have been watching them, and he's got a fantastic tale to tell about what he thinks, or what he has been told, passed down by word of mouth, of what happened in the Dennis Martin case. So buckle in, and we are going to start right here at the beginning. Dennis Martin solved at last. These hills do have eyes. All right. Take us away, South Force 10.
Spencefield probably about
Oh, that's not what I wanted to do.
40 miles that way right there.
Oh, you do it this way.
But I'm going to tell you a little story while we walk here and do a little unedited video about Dennis Martin. Now, if you don't know who Dennis Martin is, and you don't know the story behind it, this ain't the place to come find it out. Because if you found yourself here, you should know all that.
And I explained the preamble to it and who he is and what happened with him. So hopefully that lays the groundwork for what this guy's about to tell us.
What I do want to tell you is what happened to him. A lot of us local know.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, he's saying in the 1940s, his uncles were paid by the federal government to go out and hunt people in the Appalachian Mountains. People. The government was paying Appalachians to hunt people.
Diversify from being unable to speak, Harry, to being able to speak a language. Some of them were inbred, long time inbred, and turned out.
Oh, we can't hear the video? Hold on. Let me start over again. Sorry. Here, this was a problem with using StreamYard is I can never get it to, because when I go to share screen and I share the window, because I share the whole window, it doesn't give me the checkbox to share the sound. I hope the sound's not just coming through my mic. Let me see. Share screen.
A lot of them was supposedly Cherokee Indians, the Trail of Tears, the Great Smoky Mountains, slipped off the trail. But no one knows exactly how they got there. We don't. Nobody knows. But they would come in and pay these guys about once a year to go kill these things.
Morning, Carol.
Because they knew the park was going to come in eventually. So don't know exactly how much money you get for everyone you kill.
So he's saying there was like a bounty on these wild men living in the mountains in Smoky Mountain National Park. That the government had a bounty on them, and these Appalachian people were being paid by the head, the scalp of these wild men to clear them out for the national park.
This has always been an interesting grave to me. There's the original headstone. But yeah, not a lot of people around here know about it. It wasn't made big. It's probably kept it down to about 40, 50, 60 people who knew. And they would do this yearly. Sometimes 2 times a year is what I was told if they needed to.
So there were seasons. So there was like a season, like certain times a year they'd go out and say, hey, let's go hunt some humans out in the woods. Who were these Wildmen, though, and what was their story? Were these another group of settlers who had settled one of these back valleys and lived in isolation? Was this a family living out in the woods that was self-sustaining? That your uncles were out there blasting with their shotguns, or was this? Are you claiming that these were? I heard you mention the Native Americans. Were these? Were your uncles out there shooting uh, vestige populations of Native Americans holed up in the mountains? Were they out there killing the native population to make way for the park to come in, or is the claim that they were out there um, killing a undiscovered subspecies of human? None of these are good scenarios. None of these are something that your uncle should be murdering. But I digress.
I help thin them out.
Thin them out like
Well,
they're
the park come
freaking.
in.
Thin them out like it's overpopulation of deer.
Everything's great. Everything's going good. The only thing gets missing is a dog every now and then, a chicken, and everybody around here knows these people are doing it.
Kill people because they take your chicken. Kill someone because they took your livestock.
Sometimes they get a little braver, they come out of the woods, but that's who's doing it. They take chickens, dogs, cats, whatever they could catch. Well, when you're dealing with these people, they're wild. There's no guarantee what they're going to do. Till the one day the one took that boy, Dennis Martin. And when he took that boy, that's when the Green Berets came. Now, they didn't come in here to help search for that boy at all. That's why they use different radio channels. That's why they wouldn't work with the park. That's why they done their own thing. Their job was to exterminate these people.
So the Green Berets came in to exterminate.
So they came in and they done their job. They went back there and they exterminated and they killed these people. Just so happens it rained for days. So a lot of people were not in the park when a lot of this was going on, but they exterminated a bunch of them. Well, the guy that was over the case on the FBI, a lot of you may know, he committed suicide.
Right.
Well, he committed suicide because he went out and took a look at the body.
I guess that's something I did not talk about. That's a big sticking point for David Politis people too, for the missing 411 crowd. They're like, oh, this FBI investigator who was in charge of the Dennis Martin case, he committed suicide years later. And they speculated, oh, it's because of what he found out about these investigations of these missing people in the parks and what was really behind it, and he couldn't live with it. But I don't know. Suicide is a very personal thing for most people. It's not a decision anybody makes lightly. I don't know if being aware of inbred hillbillies and I say inbred hillbillies because that's the way that these are presented. In the notion of the title of this video, "The Hills Have Eyes." The Hills Have Eyes is about those were actually hillbillies that were mutated in New Mexico, though, with the bomb testing and stuff. But anyway, I digress. Yeah. Anyway, I'm just gonna play it. Sorry.
Bodies that was drug out of the park when they was killing these people, and a lot of them was children, women. A lot of them was skinny, deformed. I mean, some of them was like on the verge. You would even call them big feet. Then the next one over could say words. There was no standard by what these people could do. Well, it was too much for the man. He wound up committing suicide.
I
So,
think that you're making an inference about why he committed suicide there. That's not grounded in anything. You don't know what this man had going on in his personal life and if there's interpersonal relationships, because generally something like suicide is going to be linked more to your interpersonal relationships than it is going to be to something like a career decision, unless the career decision is like ruining you, unless it's like a stock market crash and the guys jump out the window, that kind of thing. But just I don't know, being exposed to the bizarre like this. I think there's an episode of X Files based on this too about the Peacock family, feral people in the mountains. They found like the deformed baby buried and the chromosomes were all messed up. Anyway,
so what are we going to tell people? What are we going to do? We can't tell them that we come in here and kill these things. We can't tell our tourist that brings billions and billions of dollars to these Smoky Mountains every year that,
oh honey, yeah, you can. You tell them that because that's what that brings tourists. Look at New Orleans. Look at well, Hannibal, Missouri, right here by where I live. The ghost stories about Mark Twain Cave and all the Mark Twain ghost stories. There's whole ghost tours they have all October long, from or all July long too, down through Hannibal, Missouri. I think Louisiana and New Orleans. Those tours go year round. So yeah, having things something like legends about wild men and monsters will bring tourists.
these big feet, wild men took their children. There's no way to know that we got them all. We can't guarantee them that. We'll just leave it unsolved. Unsolved to this day. No one knows what happened to Dennis Martin. But we know. There's people who live around here who know.
You don't know though. You've been told. I think I need to differentiate that because so far the story, as you've told me, is that there were people living back in the woods that may have been uh, of European descent and living in isolation, that may have been natives that escaped from the Trail of Tears to carve out an existence in the Appalachian Mountains, or it could have been uh, a population of feral humanoids that are related to or are indeed Sasquatch or Bigfoot. Or what it sounds like you're presenting is that it was a mix of all three, which is absolutely bizarre to me. However, people are telling you that that's what these people were. The people who were hired to go out and murder these individuals in the woods, the people who were paid to basically enforce like segregation and genocide. Genocide. It's and then that then there's an accusation that one of these people kidnapped Dennis Martin, or that they ate him, and therefore the federal government came in and exterminated again population of a distinct population of people. So that's like a genocide. Um, this is not the way that we would expect to interact with. At least not in the '60s. Come on.
And it's been passed down.
Passed down, right, as a war.
But that's why there will be no official report on what happened to Dennis Martin. So, you want to know, I guess, now the next question is, well, did they kill them all? Well, there's been a lot of unseen and crazy things go on in these mountains. I probably would stay off the trails in the nighttime. I would probably take the Allen Cave Bluff Trail while there was still a lot of daylight left. And I dang sure wouldn't go into these woods by myself, because these hills do have eyes. South Force 10 here. Thanks, Ed.
Title drop. I had to bounce for a second. I had a fly floating in my coffee cup, so I just went and got one of my iced coffees instead. Probably gonna finish that. I gotta go to the grocery store and get more coffee today anyway. Yeah, genocide is the U.S. Army's bread and butter. I don't doubt, but that there is a distinct species of humans living in the mountains that were eradicated by the U.S. Army in the 1960s, with no evidence at all, no physical evidence. I find it dubious. I hate to be a stickler about it, but that's just my opinion. But there's a part two, and I do want to explore this a little bit further. So, y'all are gonna have to, just give me a little bit of a leeway here, because I do have to bounce around on this one a bit, because he does talk about a few different things that are not.
I'll do a little update video here, like I promised y'all.
Mm-hmm. South Force 10.
It took a while. It's been so hot. I've been able to get out and do one. We are on the riverbank here of the Little Pigeon River. So here's a little update video that I promised I would do on Dennis Martin. But it's hard to do this video because there's a lot of macabre things about the case. A lot of stuff I struggle with doing. I know there's been a lot of questions. Y'all have had a lot of questions and stuff. Asked me, so
I'm going to speed him up a little bit. That southern draw is a little slow. Do 1.5.
Shaking the phone, trying not to, nearly as bad as I did in that last video. But we'll get right with it here. I was debating on. I've got a lot of stories to tell. Mm-hmm. All these were passed down to me from the stuff with Dennis Martin, from hunting the Bigfoot, from a lot of other stories. Just mountain folk, mountain lore. But most of it's just been passed down to me.
So now he's designating the shooting the people, his uncle's going out and shooting these people as hunting Bigfoot, which is a little different characterization than what he had said before. It made it very much like they were people.
And how that happened was I was raised by my aunts and uncles. My mom was sick, dad was truck driving. And they were a lot older people. I listened a lot. I went hunting with my uncle while he took me fox hunting. Went with a lot of older men, and I just said,
right. I don't think in what you guys are talking about out here, as far as the being genetically, they wouldn't have been genetically distinct enough to be their own species if they were interbreeding with another species of hominid. Like if Bigfoot, I'm going to say it, if Bigfoot was a species of hominid that was indigenous to the area and did interbreed with these people in the Appalachian Mountains, they wouldn't be a distinct species. They would be a hybrid. It would be Homo sapien, and then you put X, and then it'd be whatever the species name for the Sasquatch would be. Like, for instance, it'd be like a Homo sapien X Sasquatch is how it would read if they were a hybrid between the two species. But yeah, that's what it would be. It wouldn't even be a distinct species of its own.
If they're listening, y'all don't know anything about it. When you go fox hunting, you don't really tramp through the woods with a gun. You build a fire and you sit around the fire and you just talk. You wait for the dogs to run, chase the fox. That's basically it. So I listened to a lot of their stories, a lot of my aunts, uncles, grandmother's stories. A lot of them was scary, horror stories. Stuff that you wouldn't normally tell a kid these days. You know how people are nowadays. Times change.
Okay, boomer.
Look at Saturday morning cartoons. I have several stories I'm debating on. Either telling those or doing the Dennis Martin update. I've got a story where my aunt confronted the devil in her front yard.
Yeah.
Years ago. I almost cost her life.
So it's like a devil in was it the devil in Tom Walker or whatever?
There's another story. An old lady who lived up what we call Green Hall.
A witch. Okay.
Back then claimed she was a witch.
Mm-hmm.
I got all these stories to tell. I'll try to put them on here. Dennis Martin.
There we go.
Well, I would sit and listen to my uncle and these other men that would go on these hunts. And then their dads would go on these hunts. For Dennis Martin. I mean, not for Dennis Martin, but for these things that took this one. They would go and they would be rewarded by bringing these bodies in. They would have a meetup place, and they would get paid for every body they brought in. Now, I talked to my sister, as I done in the last video. I kind of asked her some questions. She's a lot older than I am. And I asked her a few questions, and she told me when I called these things people, that's where I was wrong. She told me there was nothing remotely human about these things. She told me a story once when she was a little girl that the neighbors had called them.
Why would you say nothing remotely human about them? Everything about Sasquatch and the lore surrounding it kind of implies that it's a hominid of some stripes. Definitely a primate, if anything.
Peeping in the window of their child. Mm-hmm. They knew it had been doing it. They've been trying to catch it for a while. She never saw it. They made her go inside, and she said that she could hear this thing screaming. And she said it was the most ungodly scream that you ever heard. She says it still wakes her up today with nightmares. She's nearly 70 years old today. On good health. She
never saw it. Then how does she know it was one of these things? Just hearing the sound of someone screaming?
She remembers a lot of this stuff. She heard a lot of it too. But anyway, people ask me questions. The number one question I got was, do I know David Paulides? Or have I got my video to him, or has he seen my video? No, I don't know him. I have no idea if he has seen my video. I don't have any way of getting my video to him or in contact with him, but I would be more than glad to talk to him if he wanted to talk. More than happy.
Oh, spooky. It's a state of mind. You say kids these days. Anytime I hear somebody say kids these days, that's my automatic response. Are cyborgs humans? I guess they would be, at least the parts of them that were flesh, that were organic, would be human.
The hard part is a lot of people know about Dennis Martin, and they want to know about the body. Well, nothing's really been confirmed about the body. There have been a lot of rumors, and that's all this is. It's just a rumor. But some people claim that they did find some of his remains, and they didn't want to tell the family. They didn't want the family to view these remains that they was actually pretty gruesome. These people were cannibals. And,
so their claim here is that they found Dennis Martin's remains, but they were partially eaten, so they didn't tell the family. I don't think that's how that would work either, but maybe I'm wrong.
What they found, they destroyed when they destroyed the people they went into the park to exterminate, the Green Berets. Did the Martin family ever know this happened to their child? Yes, I think the guy's name, McCarter. I think Dwight McCarter, I think he told the family what happened. Now, I can't be 100% sure on that. I know that he knows about these things and stuff, him being in the park most of his life. And I've heard comments that he's made on TV and stuff. So yeah, how much he told them, I don't know. You know, I'm sure he told them never found a body or anything like that. Like I say, that's just rumor anyway. But
you do have a good point there, John. It's always the people who are already predispositioned to believe that that supernatural experiences are popular, who are possible, who have supernatural experiences. Their brains are already primed to interpret phenomena as supernatural. So things like witchcraft and demons and devils and all that stuff, especially when you're out in the woods. It is a real psychological phenomena to have these. What's the word I'm looking for? It's basically the word panic is derived from the feeling you get when you're alone in the woods and it's really quiet, because it's supposed to be that silence is supposed to be the music of Pan's flute or his lyre, the thing that's supposed to be that silence is the music that he makes. With that, and it's supposed to drive you mad when you're out in the woods by yourself and there's nothing but silence. That's where the word panic comes from. So when you experience that, there are cases where you can have audible or visual hallucinations and things like that when you're in that state. If you're already predispositioned to think that you are the supernatural, witchcraft, curses, spells, magic, demons, ghosts, spirits, those kind of things are out in the world, out to get you, you can interpret those experiences, that panic that you have, as a supernatural experience.
That was another question that I got. The other question was, where did these things come from? And since I talked to my sister, she let me know that there were two different types of these fertile men, these fertile people. There was the kind that looked like a man, woman. But then there was another kind that was bigger, hairier, meaner. Some people claim that they had fangs. I don't know. I've never witnessed any of these myself. But that's what I got from her. There was actually, I think those were probably far more in line with the Bigfoot type. So these things would go over into Townsend, Tennessee. I don't know if you're familiar with that or not, but you can look at it on Google Earth and find it, see how close it lies to the park. And when Townsend very first started getting his first grocery store, restaurant and stuff, it was real convenient for them to get into these dumpsters and find food. And I think that's kind of what started a lot of it. You know, they would come in and they'd take these people's cats and dogs and pigs and whatever they could find. And by the way, Dennis Martin was not the first child.
Look at that. Logan's all over it. Thank you, Logan. That's exactly the reference I was making.
Smokies. He was the most publicized child because he was from Knoxville. And you might as well have been from Atlanta, Georgia, and New York City, because that's how much difference there is between Knoxville, Townsend, Tennessee, Cato, Forster County. I mean, it may be 25, 30 miles separated, but it's a world of difference. So that's why it was made such a big deal.
And now there's it's kind of a fallacy here that only people from Cades Cove can understand what the culture of Cades Cove is like. That my segregated, isolated community is unique, and there may be some merit to that. But as far as let's say wood lore, I guess, and the way that wood lore is passed down through generations, and the way that that this knowledge is garnered through people over generations is not unique to Cades Cove, though, because there's lore like this from all over Appalachia and beyond. There's lore like that right here in my own backyard. We had the Momo, Missouri monster thing, the Monkey Run. They had a report from the 1800s of an orangutan swimming across the Mississippi right here, just a couple miles down the river from me. So in the 1800s, an orangutan. So this isn't unique to, these aren't unique kind of sightings to Cades Cove.
Yeah, there was a few that went missing way back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. There have been more missing than what's been told. So I've done something big. But the Dennis Martin, he really shined the light on it. So that's when the park officials decided they had to do something about this. They can't have people going into the park. This can't happen again. This could not happen again. So the Green Berets come in and they did what they did. And when I said in my last video, a lot of us locals know about this. I guess what I mean by that is a lot of the people that I grew up with knew. Everybody in my world knew, in my short world that I was related to, they knew, because people in my family were involved in these hunts. No, not everybody on the street, walking down the street of Sevierville, Fishing Forge, knew.
I mean, I can lay down a scenario here where, backwoods family with maybe European and Native American ancestry was carving out a little lifestyle back in the Smoky Mountains and up and into the 1960s. And an individual of this family did do a predatory attack on the Martin boy, and the Green Berets did come in and kill these people. I could even concede that that's a possibility. The FBI doesn't tell us everything. The government doesn't tell us everything. I understand that. Who's been killed for what reason, especially in the 1960s when there wasn't digital media. So any reports on this would have been hard copies and could have been filed away in a drawer far, far away. I concede that. What I question, I'm not saying that did happen. I'm just saying that's a thing that could have happened. it's a realistic possibility that the government did go out in and kill a family living in the mountains in relation to the Dennis Martin disappearance. Maybe there's a shootout, even things like that. Possibilities are there. However, that these people were hybrids between humans and something else, that they were inbred to the point of deformity and all this these other claims. I don't disagree that they could have been skinny and malnourished. Um, Living off the land is a rough lifestyle, but the notion that they were beast people is what I find dubious.
What's going on? So that's another thing somebody asked me. If everybody knew that this was happening, then how did the water family not know? So that's another question I got asked. But no, it's just everyone that was in my world, everyone that I knew when I was growing up. Some of the neighbors' kids, their parents was in on this too. Everybody lived in that little holler. They was all privy to this information that went on, and probably the next hollow over, they had no idea. So no, not everyone knew.
Well, that's what I was talking about with him saying, "Oh, it's isolated and only people from Cades Cove know." But that's not how lore works. It gets carried. No matter how big of a cap you try to put on it, people talk. You don't. You people in that holler. They didn't. They have cousins in the next holler over, and they meet them at Thanksgiving. They go spend the holidays with them. They tell stories, and then those people go over to the next holler over, maybe even into the big city like Knoxville, and spread that story spreads there, and then it's all over the place. So it doesn't stay as much as you want to make a case that it stays isolated within this groups of people. People talk, people tell stories. This lore travels and changes over time. Maybe the interpretation you've heard is changed from the original as well.
Everyone couldn't know because this was such an illegal thing that they were doing, and you couldn't tell everybody. So, and by the way, these videos aren't for everybody to listen to. Listen.
Such an illegal thing. Are you talking about your uncle's genociding these people in the mountains, or the federal government coming in and exterminating them completely? I mean, both of those things sound like they'd be human rights violations against these people. And you make a case that they're not people or that they are a different species of people, but either way, under what grounds do you think that your uncles had to go out and murder these people? I mean, obviously, after the Dennis Martin case, with a child being involved in disappearing, I could see how a situation like that could escalate into a tragic situation for the people living in the mountains. I can see how that would escalate. But just before the Dennis Martin thing, when you're talking about them going out in their trucks with their shotguns and hunting these people for money, what is the justification to murder these people? Whether they are or are not related to a different species of human or hybrid or even a Bigfoot, what is the justification to go out and murder them? That's what I want to understand.
This upsets you, or you're part of the Martin family, and you don't already know this information, then don't listen to it. Don't play it any further than this. If this disturbs you, you don't believe it, whatever, then I'm just telling you the things that I was told as I was growing up. They had no reason to lie. They had no reason to make this stuff up. They talked about hunting these things.
I'm not saying they lied or made it up. Stories get bigger and embellished over time. It's just the way that it works.
More than just what happened with Dennis Martin.
Everybody's talking about my girl Lizzo in the side chat. Hell yeah, Lizzo rocks.
He was just a small part of the conversation. But I just passed on what was told to me when I was growing up, sitting around the fire, listening. When they would describe it, they would describe how the park wanted to come into this area, but was afraid to because they had heard the stories of these beasts living in these woods, and they wanted to clear it out before they moved into the area.
Why are they beasts? So this is what's driving me crazy about this video. You keep going back and forth between describing them as if they were some kind of animalistic beast to some kind of people that are living back in there. You say there's two kinds. The one kind are beasts, and the other kind are humans that can talk. You don't. I want to see where you're getting these correlations and such.
So they did. They cleared them out.
Mm-hmm.
But one got brave one day, and they're stealthy. What I've been told, you could be standing right beside one in the park, and unless you smelled it and stunk real bad, you wouldn't have no idea you were standing there beside it. So,
see, and that's Bigfoot lore right there with them being smelly. I get that. I can concur to that.
I'm sure Dennis Martin probably never seen this thing coming. And from what I've been told, it probably snapped his neck the moment that it picked him up. And I could be wrong. He could have took him back very alive at that moment. I know there was another family that seen one of these things running. They could describe what they saw, but it was kept out of the news. It was kept out of the media. So that right there should tell you something. I think the family's name was the Key family. And that's odd because they hold a big key to this information.
Only 3/5 of people, right, D?
They can't keep quiet, so it was. Let's get quiet. I think the Martin family found out about it and confronted them. They kind of played it down. But this has been kept quiet around here all these years. And I can remember my grandfather telling me not to ever talk about this. But it would cause trouble one day for me. That there's a lot of money that changes hands around here in this county. Depends on these tourists to come, spend their money. And when you get a story out there like this, that scares the most visited part of the country, well, then they're going to go somewhere else. Then somebody's going to lose some money, and then somebody's in trouble. So he always told me not to repeat none of this or tell what I was told.
I was told not to repeat this or tell anybody what I was told, so I put it on YouTube, and it has 40,000 views so far. 40,000 views. Don't tell anybody though.
I have never told anything about it. And one day I got on the internet and I saw that all these people were talking about this, and I thought it was strange. All these people talking. Here I am sitting and been told what I know. So I thought, well, I'm just going to put that video out there. In case something ever happens to me, there'll be something left behind. Maybe somebody will know one day. Right people play that video. I had no idea it was going to get as many views as it has got. But anyway, I know a lot of people said that this was false and it was a lie. And not a lick of truth in it. No proof. No, there's no proof. The government does not leave proof laying around. There's no proof. Like I say, it's just stories that was told. And you can believe it.
Right, with no proof, and you believe it. I understand. I don't doubt that South Force 10 might believe these tales, but I don't know if I believe the people that told South Force 10 these tales. That's kind of my position right now.
It doesn't matter to me one way or another. I'm just a messenger here telling you messages that I was told when I was young. And there's a lot more of them. I'll tell you more here in a couple of days, some of the ones I told you there about and stuff. Some real interesting stuff, some scary stuff, some stuff children don't need to listen to or hear.
Mm-hmm.
I know when I was young, it bothered me for a long time hearing some of the stuff that I was told because this just ain't your up in the night.
I'm sorry if this is hard to listen to. This accent is actually soothing for me to listen to. Because my grandma and her family, I have a fondness for Appalachian accent and listening to just stories being told with that accent. So yeah, if y'all aren't digging on this though, I can make sure to vet for that sort of thing. But this is the voice these kind of stories are supposed to be told to my brain. And my grandma did have stories about wild people and stuff, so maybe sometime I'll share those with you guys. She had some stories about cattle mutilation too.
Stuff. It's very horrifying. Very strange place in the world is these mountains and these hills. Till then,
see,
I guess I'll be seeing y'all later. Good night.
All right, so I do think that that maybe this gentleman's sister is the one dragging this along like that, but that's just speculation on my part. Maybe it is something his uncles told him because he's like, oh, my sister told me this, my sister told me that. my uncles and said this and that. It's a lot of oral tradition being passed down. So not not necessarily blaming South Force 10. He's just sharing the lore, which is seems to be the basis of his channel. If you go and look at what he's doing, he's not saying that. I mean, obviously, he presents the narrative says, it has to be. This could possibly be true. But there's ghost stories, the ghost of the Moonshine Holler, Death Omen of the Smokies, things like that. He's talking about folklore, so I'm not gonna bust his chops about this too much. It is sad that a real disappearance of a real child was caught up in this lore. I wish that he would be more courteous with the language that he uses, is saying, I know this happened, because he kind of waffles and goes back and forth. And I know this happened to, this is just what I was told happened. It's, this is what the story that's been passed down to me, and they didn't have any reason to lie. Now you can present it that way, but don't say I know this happened. There's a child involved here. This was someone's kid. This was someone's little boy that they never got to see again. They never got to see finish school or go on a first date or have any of these experiences throughout life, have the talk about birds and bees, whatever. Any of these first experiences, that parent never gets to share that with their kid because of this disappearance. So I'm not saying that specifically a South Force 10 was being flippant. Maybe a little bit. Maybe what should have been done was that disclaimer that you put in the last 2 minutes of the video should have went at the beginning. If you're a member of the Martin family or are deeply disturbed by this, blah blah blah, don't finish watching this. This is lore. This is oral lore passed down through my family. Something along those lines. A disclaimer. That's what you need to do moving forward with your channel, I think. But we may visit South Force 10 again. He had some stuff on a video I started watching the other night about witchcraft. Yeah, the witches of the Great Smoky Mountains. I am interested in that because again, my family's kind of tied into that, and I like that that part of our folklore for Appalachian people. Anyway, that was Cryptic Corner. We talked about the alleged cannibals of the Smoky Mountains that are associated with the disappearance of Dennis Martin, among other people in the Smoky Mountain region. I hope you enjoyed that. If you're watching this on Cryptic Corner on Friday night, thank you so much for tuning in and sticking around. It was a fun one, and got to explore some folklore and some family history for Bree. So thanks again, and please remember to be kind and take care, and we'll see you next time.